Hello guys, Conduit here, and I want to talk about a brand new Hearts of Iron 4 mod that just came out, and I just can't stop playing it. It's called The Fire Rises. It came out about a week or two ago, and it completely flew underneath my radar. I didn't see anything about it. I wasn't a part of the sub during its development like I am with a lot of other Hearts of Iron 4 mods. But I saw some people on the subreddit posting screenshots of focuses, so I just downloaded it immediately after I saw a schizo buy-in focus tree. But I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. So this is a modern day mod starting in 2020, January 1st, before COVID hits. But in this timeline, COVID is a lot deadlier. Along with COVID being deadlier in America, a George Floyd incident occurs, but instead of the protests that occurred in our timeline, which were, fiery but mostly peaceful, they are much, much worse and more radical actions occur during the game. So the game actually compares them to a Rodney King riot level and on an almost national scale, and this sparks extremism on both sides of the compass. From anarcho communists rising up to full blown Nazis, and of course the Patriot Front. I think the cool part about this game is how a lot of the groups are real, which, now that I say that, it actually doesn't sound like the coolest thing, but I still find it interesting. This extremism causes the 2020 election to be even more extreme than our own timeline, and no matter who wins, Trump or Biden, a civil war is inevitable. There are multiple playable factions within the Civil War and different paths for each of them to follow, which I find really cool. If you support Trump, you can become a Caesar-like figure who works with the military to become something like a dictator. Or you can also go down his more populist path where you work with the Congress and the military to keep the country stable. Or my personal favorite, you can go down the libertarian path where you select Rand Paul as your vice president and set America down a path to freedom. You can also support Biden, who has equally as interesting focuses, such as going down a more progressive path with a Bernie Sanders sort of democratic socialism path, his regular establishment path, or a more unified party tickets path where you unite with other Republicans who sided with him, like Mitt Romney. And then also, as I mentioned, there's also some funny secret focuses, like you're able to unlock a secret schizo path for Biden, where he sort of leans into being a Caligula type figure who's insane but has absolute power. Some of the other factions you can play as are the Atomwaffen, who are in Florida, and I read their Wikipedia page after seeing that. They are a real neo-Nazi terrorist organization. And in game, they basically want to blow up the whole world while they hide in a bunker, and then everyone dies. They're going to be the only Aryans left, and they can have a pure world to themselves. If you're more of a leftist, there's also the Liberation Party of America, who come out of California, and they are the much more leftist communist path, and they are able to take over all of America. You can also play as the Patriot Front, what I guess are more run-of-the-mill fascists as opposed to actually being Nazi adherents, so think more Mussolini than Hitler. There's also a bunch of smaller factions that are involved in the Civil War that aren't really playable, but I think they have a lot of potential if the devs were ever to add focus trees for them. Like you can play as the Mormons in Utah. There's a libertarian militia faction in New Hampshire. The Confederates come back. There's a Black Liberation Army. A lot of really interesting other sort of separatist warlord movements that rise up. And I find this really interesting because a lot of the factions are real. I mean, they're based off of real ideologies. Some of them are real groups. And a lot of the paths feel, I'll say it, they feel realistic. Which might sound a little silly, but I think it really plays into the whole meme of like, I wish the world would burn so my ideology can rise up from the ashes, except in this mod you can actually play as your ideology. You can also play as European countries such as Germany, France, and Russia. I would say out of Europe's countries, Russia is probably the most interesting. I won't spoil too much of it, but Putin does die from COVID, unlike our own timeline, which delays the invasion of Ukraine. And with America out of the picture, when Russia finally does decide to invade, this leads to direct intervention from Europe. Russia has 3 paths. I haven't gotten to play all of them yet, but there is the Putin's party path, where you continue on having a strongman in charge. Then there's also the nationalist path and the communist path. They all set Europe down a very different and usually dark path. You can also play as China and Japan, which I haven't done yet, but their content seems pretty exciting since Japan and China do declare war on each other, and China does invade Taiwan. But other than the cool focuses and political paths, what sets this mod apart first is the fact that there's an economy to tend to. It is pretty basic. You just have a GDP and then a debt that you have to try to work down and not have overtake your GDP. If your debt is too high, you get debuffs, and then you also have to make sure that you keep some cash liquid. That way you can use it to buy decisions in the decision tab, which you will use in this mod a lot. The mod itself even tells you that if you do not check the decision tab, you are going to lose. Which definitely Vanilla Hoi 4 does not lean into that much. A reason why I love this mod so much is that it feels like just so eerie and familiar. I mean, I truly believe that if different actions had happened during the 2020 election in America, I think a civil war could have started, or at the very least some sort of mass violence. So I think it's really interesting to have a mod team be so plugged into, like, I don't know, sort of like internet extremism culture. Not to say they obviously disavow all of these extremist factions, but I think it's really interesting just because I have heard of some of these different factions. It's real world politics, real world political people. I mean, obviously Rand Paul is a sitting senator, so is Bernie Sanders. A lot of these people are real people, so it really contributes to this sort of realism, and it's sort of a different feel for the mod. Because obviously there are other modern day mods that you can play in Hoi 4, like Millennium Dawn, but that one, it just doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel lived in. I mean, they try to add all these different focuses and UN mechanics, but at the end of the day, the world feels rather static and kind of reactive to you. But in this mod, it feels like while you're fighting your own crisis, everywhere else in the world is also having an equally terrible time. And that you can kind of tell that, well, the fire is rising, the world is becoming hotter, the world is becoming more violent and more extreme. So I definitely think that that contributes a lot to the mod. I like how every mod path, it has you play as the hero of your own story, which the mod does sort of point out. So when you play as Trump, everything is through his eyes, and you feel like you're doing the right thing. And I also feel like the writing is really good. I mean, there's a point where at the start of the Civil War, and if you're playing as Trump, there's a part where he's like talking to his generals, and he says, "Hard times create heroes," and I just think that I don't know, it does a lot. It feels realistic. If you're winning as Trump, you can actually visit New York, and there's a little event where he goes to Trump Tower and sees what's been destroyed, his hometown, his own little empire, if you would, it has crumbled. And I just think it's really interesting and has some really good writing. I mean, when you play as the Russian, everything reads as how Putin would feel. They've been betrayed by the West. They need to get revenge. They've been left alone. I just think it's interesting to just get such a unique look at political groups and countries that exist today. It just feels a bit more real than when you play as, like, you know, when you play as Germany in Vanilla Hearts of Iron 4, you don't really feel too much of the evilness. It feels really disconnected just because it was so long ago. And also fascism is somewhat of a dead ideology. But even when you play as, like, Stalin or the USSR, in Vanilla Hoi 4, that is a very plain experience, like a lot of like meme focus tree sort of, where it's like, we're all in this together, communism, one for all. I mean, in this game, it really feels real, especially with the events that go on and how you get different perspective of your actions. I just find it really interesting. I think the mod devs have done a really great job of attempting to sort of capture the complex global landscape that we have today, and what would happen if America were taken off the global stage. I love how some countries are just sort of attempting to survive this onslaught of terrible things happening, while as other countries are trying to reclaim your world, your worldview. I really do hate to compare this mod to the New World Order, because that's sort of what, like, everybody does with these narrative mods that come out. Everything, it's sort of like calling something the Dark Souls of games. But it really is the closest mod experience that I can think of when it comes to other Hoi 4 mods. This is a lot like the New Order. It's a dark, twisted world that you have to play through. And maybe there's some light at the end of the tunnel, or maybe you're playing as the bad guys and there isn't. So I just really recommend this mod. It's been consuming a lot of my free time, and there is a lot of content to play through. I'm actually really glad I didn't hear about this mod while they were developing it, because I can't imagine having to wait, especially just because for their 1.0 release, there's just so much content to play through. Every country that you're able to play as right now that's playable has at least 4 or 5 years of content. There's a lot to do, different paths to take. So I just really recommend it. That's all I have got. I just wanted to talk about this new mod that's been, really consuming me lately. So that's all I have. Remember, Jesus loves you.